I was brought up, nurtured and surrounded by the hills and waters of Wellington. I'm a Kiwi with predominantly Irish ancestry, and I live in Auckland. The leadership that I step up to is grounded in a love of the world. My name is Libby Giles. Greetings to all of you, to all of us. My mihi goes to the people of this land, to our hosts at the Green School, to Beyond COP21, and to all the expert contributors at this event. And most of all to you, to all of you who are taking part today and are going to be living this message. The journey will not stop here. On behalf of University of Waikato Cape's education team, we are really honoured to partner in this event, so we invite you to step up to the world. So, some ideas that we'll be covering here and that you might see some things to tap into in your journal as well. So we're going to be looking just a bit into, how you get to be a global citizen. Before I go into this a bit more, can anybody tell me how you get to be a citizen of a country? How do you get to be a citizen of Aotearoa, New Zealand? Yes? So go to somewhere and get a whole citizenship thing. So that indicates to me that you might have to do something to earn it, right? There might be some things that you sort of requirements you might have to fill. Yep, that's one way. Yep.
So is there a time of how long you have to be in New Zealand?
Maybe after being here for a certain amount of time might be one of those requirements. Yep. We got another one. Yep. Sorry, you were first, I think. Yeah. That would be a result of it, wouldn't it? That would be something that you might get from it. Yep.
Being born?
Yeah, that's the easiest way, isn't it? Getting born in a place is actually the easiest way. You don't have to do anything. You're just born there, right? So what we've got here is kind of a couple of roads to citizenship, and that is you're either born somewhere or you fulfil some requirements. It might be a skills shortage. There might be all kinds of things that countries want. But what happens then is that once you've become a citizen of a country, you get certain rights bestowed on you by the government, right, that make you a citizen of that country. So let's just hold on to that thought a little bit. I'm going to just move on here now. Has anybody heard of Socrates from ancient Greek philosophy? One of my kind of favourite things. Well, Socrates said, "I am a citizen of the world." Not just a citizen of Athens or Greece. A former British Prime Minister, and you'd be forgiven for not remembering how many there have been since her. But Theresa May said, people who think they are citizens of the world are citizens of nowhere. So, legally, she's right, because there is no world government to bestow rights on the people to make them citizens in the way that you have just demonstrated that you become a citizen of a country. But there is a bit of a difference there, and that is that the definition of citizenship has two parts to it. Partly the rights that are bestowed on you by a state, and the other part is to do with your behavioural characteristics. So the way I see it, responsibility, it's our responsibility to other people and to the earth that gives legitimacy to this idea of global citizenship. So hold on to that. You might want to put a bit of that in your journal as well at some point. Global citizenship is not a new idea at all. There are blueprints to be found in the knowledge systems of Indigenous peoples and in the foundations of Eastern and Western thought, or Eastern and Western philosophies. Put up your hand if you've seen this picture. It's a really famous picture called Earthrise. On Christmas Eve 1968, when the first manned mission to the moon, Apollo 8, it had slipped into its fourth orbit of the moon, and suddenly the crew were getting ready to send a message home to Earth, a happy Christmas message, and suddenly as it kind of came round on its fourth lap of the moon, and they'd been looking at this, getting to be a little bit boring grey surface that they're looking at, there it was, through the window. It became visible, this sparkling, beautiful blue bauble. And they could see, they hadn't been sent there to look at the Earth, they'd been sent there to look at the moon. But in doing so, for the first time, they saw the Earth as a whole. Now these guys, these astronauts, were not sort of like soft skills greenie types, I can tell you. They were what we call Cold War warriors. They were in a time where there was a nuclear arms race going on, it was a battle for getting to the moon and all this kind of stuff. And so even these they used to talk about having the right stuff to be an astronaut. And one of them actually said, after looking at it, his name was astronaut Anders, who was an arch Cold Warrior, and what was overwhelming to all of them was that this was a moment for humanity. He said, "This is the only home we have, yet here we are busy shooting at each other, threatening nuclear war and wearing suicide vests." This is 1968. It amazes me. This picture has taken on significance for a number of movements, not only the kind of geopolitical one, but enormously for the environmental movement over the years. And increasingly now, as we look at the concept of modern global citizenship, where we recognise this as one living, breathing thing that we all belong to. And to tap into the title of our conference today, at the conclusion of the Paris Agreement, of COP21, President Francois Hollande said, "What brings us together is the planet itself." So in these times of state competition and self-interest, it was recognised that you're not even going to be able to protect your own country's interests if you don't look after the planetary interest. While the deliverability of the Paris Agreement remains to be seen, what we do know is that shift in thinking. And it did send out a very strong message. Who knows this story? What's it called? No, not the Lorex, close though. The Sneetches, yeah, so the Sneetches. And so in the Sneetches, so what we're doing here is a little bit of an analogy about international growing into global. So I like to use the Sneetches because the Sneetches were like, well, they look pretty much the same, except for some of them have got stars on their bellies and some haven't, right? So the ones with stars on their bellies thought that they were really, really cool, and they had Frankfurter parties, and they didn't invite the ones with no bellies, no stars on their bellies. And so they were really, bummed out about that, and it was really, they were sad and felt left out of the game. They weren't in the game, and they really didn't like it. And so this is a situation of like us and them, which is a little bit like international. It's us and them. You try to sort of get on, but it's not always easy. So then you get somebody coming along who's trying to think, okay, I've got something here, I can fix this. These people have got these Sneetches with no bellies, no stars on their bellies. I can put stars on their bellies so they'll be like the others. They'll be happy, they'll pay me some money to do it. And so they did that, and that was all really cool, but then they couldn't tell the difference. So then he was called Sylvester McMonkey McBean. So then he went and told the ones who originally had stars on their bellies that actually stars on your bellies are really uncool now. So I've got a machine to take them off. So on and on it went. And this is kind of, this becomes a bit more like what we talk about as globalisation. Global citizenship is not about being the same. That's globalisation, and it's done for economic advantage. So this is the kind of driven by corporate greed idea of trying to make us the same or want the same things. It's not the same as global citizenship itself. So, it is really, really important to note this thing about us not being the same. That we must celebrate our differences and learn from them. We have a lot in common, more than we think, and we're increasingly and undeniably connected. But global is we. And that's recognising that, so eventually, anyway, how the story goes, is that after all this fighting and all this money, and he drives off in his van with all the money falling off because he's made so much, and they eventually realise that, oh, come on, we've just been done here. And actually, let's look at ourselves and our own humanity and recognise what wonderful things we have to share. So while it's grounded in universal principles, global citizenship fosters and celebrates identity and diversity. It gives us ways to become global without being the same. The worry of many when it comes to globalisation, it focuses on common humanity while celebrating what makes us different. This is a human rights-based approach to living together and sharing finite resources. And that's reflected in agreements, international agreements that turn into law, international law, like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or more recently, what's on this banner, what have we talked about a lot in this? The Sustainable Development Goals. These things take on a kind of a moral authority that becomes international law. Now, it's no news to anybody here that we live in a rapidly changing, complex world and face enormous challenges and existential threats. But let's not be all doom and gloom. Our views get skewed by the media that's full of bad stories, but we also have huge opportunities. The fact that that there are disagreements doesn't mean that we can't learn to live together. And global citizenship isn't about over there somewhere. Socrates didn't go anywhere, but he knew who he was, how he was connected, and how he should live. And he devised a method of teaching and learning and remains an enduring symbol of critical thinking and ethics. These are key components of global citizenship education. On to global citizenship education. At the Capes, we have a framework underpinned by three big ideas. Tuakeretanga, identity, hononga, connections, and kaitiakitanga, responsibility. Global citizenship education is a key tool in response to contemporary challenges. It's also quite a mouthful to say, so we quite often shorten that to GCED, or GCED if you prefer. It provides a conceptual lens or framework through which to deliver whole and authentic learning experiences for all, and I mean all, from early childhood through primary, secondary, university and beyond. This is for all of us all the time. It's holistic and interdisciplinary, embedded in teaching and learning, pastoral care, absolutely every part of a school or an organisation. Our organisation, the Centres of Asia Pacific Excellence, support global citizenship education in schools in New Zealand and in the region using this framework. There isn't a set model. It's not a cookie-cutter model design, this thing. But there are certain principles that remain the same. And so each school or organisation should have its own model that is tied to its values. It has deep roots. This isn't some fly-by-night thing that's come along that people are going to get sick of. Global citizenship education has got roots beginning straight after World War II, the founding of the United Nations, of UNESCO, with intentions of bringing peace to the world and sustainable living through education. And it aligns to New Zealand initiatives, New Zealand curriculum, Te Mātaiaho, Te Tiriti o Waitangi, international obligations like the Sustainable Development Goals, Human Rights Declaration, and so on and so on and so on. So this isn't like just a nice thing to do. This is a requirement. We must get on with this. Sometimes I think we really need to get back to the basics here, though. And there's a lot of talk about getting back to the basics. At its core, GCED emphasises the basic values of empathy, compassion, respect, and responsibility. By embracing it, we are equipped to analyse global issues and actively contribute to positive change. It encourages us to think beyond ourselves and our borders and work collaboratively. As we embrace simplicity and rediscover the power of basic values, we can collectively build a more inclusive, equitable, peaceful, sustainable, and compassionate world for generations to come. When it all seems too hard, getting back to the basics with GCED offers a refreshing perspective on how we can create a better future. Let us remember the power of simplicity, and the fundamental values that ground us and connect us. We momentarily did just that during the COVID-19 pandemic. In desperate attempts to return to normal, we hear calls for education to get back to the basics of literacy and numeracy for student achievement and cut back on some of those nice-to-haves like the arts and humanities and languages and sustainability, etc. Why is this? We're horrified at the thought of students leaving school not being able to read, write or do maths. But shouldn't we be equally concerned about the ability to think critically and act responsibly? We do need a timely reminder to return to the basics of being decent human beings. On pondering what it means to be a decent human being, I was talking to one of my colleagues and I said, what do you think it means being a decent human being? And she said, oh, just don't be an egg. It's not easy. It's not always easy not being an egg. And we need to work together. You don't have to take on the world's problems on your own. SDG Goal 17 is about partnerships. This event is founded on partnerships, and many new partnerships will form here. Let us keep what we know really matters in mind as we step forward and we step up together to transform education and the world. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. Do we have time for question time or are we done? I think we have a little bit of time for questions if there are any. Oh, it was all so crystal clear, you just don't need to ask me anything. Awesome. Who's ready to step up? Oh, yes, we got one there. Great.
Stars and the non-stars. I did a book at home about wooden people. When you've got stars and dots. I forgot what it's called, but it's similar.
Is it the same kind of idea?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Hey, and interesting, somebody else mentioned the Lorax, and Dr. Zeus was actually pretty big on social messages in his books, and one of them, I don't know if anybody's here interested in like nuclear weapons stuff, but there's one called the Butter Battle Book that's all about the nuclear arms race. Quite interesting. Any other questions? Okay, then I've got a question for you. Who's ready to step up to the world? We all are. We invite you to do that and we look forward to continuing the journey with you.